a friend wanted to go out to a straight club dancing, and it was for a big event in her life, so I'm like, fine, let's just go. So for many reasons, that would not be the space I'd be in, but I was in that space. So when we were standing on the curb waiting to cross the street, I was dressed appropriately for an event of going out that night, I thought. So I had on, a shirt and tie and vest, and I was looking good. And then this car of young, they must have been in their 20s, like white dudes, go strolling by, and they looked at me, and then they made some derogatory comments about they wanted me to prove my womanness to them. So what was exposed in that moment is that something about the way that I was citing woman genderness was not working for them, and they wanted some sort of proof of what you really are. You don't get to wear those clothes and have those parts, I guess. None of this happens on a conscious level in performativity, just like here we are in this world. So that happened, and then not 10 minutes later, when we're going into the club, so I'm wearing the same outfit, and it's still downtown Greensboro, it's still the same social setting, context, and everything. We're going into the club, and the person taking the money said, it's ladies' night, ladies get in free. And I got charged. So in a span of 10 minutes, I didn't do anything differently, but in those moments, how I was citing gender and what those people were reading for gender were all being influenced by everything contextually that was going on. I just thought it was interesting because, nothing had changed in 10 minutes, but I got read in really different ways. And so, yeah, there's no gender there as they exposed.
Performativity is a fun word, I think, because it has to do with not only how we see ourselves, but how we act in the world and how we perform in the world. And using props like jewelry and clothes and language becomes part of how you create this concept of who you are or who you want to be.
Performance of gender is very visible through, you can see it a lot in infants. So infants appear gender ambiguous, and so a lot of them have the same haircuts, they can't dress themselves, they're just they have diapers, you can't necessarily tell them apart. And so parents or their guardians or the people that are responsible for them will pierce young girls' ears early on to perform their gender, or put baseball hats on young infant boys. So that way when people come up and say, oh, what's your girl's name or what's your boy's name, that people need to necessarily read someone's gender in order to know how to interact with them. And so I feel like it's this social construct that there's this right and normative way to perform your gender.
Performativity says that it's when I do girl, that's when I become girl. It's in the action. There's not an original that precedes the action. The action is what makes you what you are.
In my cubicle, I have a picture of, my partner and another love that I have, two pictures of people that I love are hanging in my cubicle, and they're different races from me, and it doesn't really feel like that's the same, people don't have that, I'm the only one who has that, right? So I kind of am always ready and on to handle that in a way that is gonna just get me out of trouble and out of danger. And when I first was thinking about talking about this, that's kind of where it came for me, because on one hand, like I said, there's my artistic self and there's that kind of performance, but then it's this day-to-day stuff where I'm just trying to make it. I'm just trying to survive and just be okay and keep what's important and sacred to me all right and be authentic to myself, but also just get through the day.
When I was putting myself through undergraduate, during the day I was a leasing consultant. So there was this idea of being a business female and wearing business suits and yet still having, being submissive to authority figures, and it's still in customer service. And then at night I was a beer girl. And so it was this whole other spectrum of what a female was. And so it was more of this hypersexualized female. And then during the day, I was a woman and gender studies student. And so, during the afternoons, and that's when my feminism would come out. And yet I needed these other jobs in order to get through what I was passionate about. So there's this disconnect. Even though they're all different performances of what a female is, there's not, this one heteronormative piece, and yet they all fit into that spectrum.
If you were to go into a classroom at UNCG, which was traditionally a women's school, if you went into that classroom in 1900 and there was somebody wearing pants, that was enough of a social cue at that point that it either meant that's for sure a man or it's for sure a lesbian. If you went into that classroom today, like I teach a class that is predominantly female. Well, the women in there mostly wear pants. And nobody reads them as lesbians, and nobody reads them as men. So the fact that the women of 1900 thought they were doing woman, and the women of 2012 are also doing woman in these classrooms, shows that it's historically contingent what counts. It's not. If wearing skirts was an essence that had to be expressed because of womanness, like I get up in the morning and my vagina sends an urge that I must put on a skirt. If that was the case, then people would still be doing that. Well, it's clearly not the case, so it had to come from somewhere.
When I was in high school, I went to a really small kind of country high school, and every girl in the school had long hair past her shoulders, and when I was 16, I cut mine off. Well, at the time it felt super short. It was still longer than what it is now, but it's showing up to class on Monday morning. I'm the same person that they've been to school with since kindergarten, but because I had short hair, automatically questions of my sexuality came into play.
I kind of think of it as how I see myself going through the world and how that kind of turns itself into like real life, everyday stuff, but also into an art form, and it kind of gets blended together. I live in a world that's kind of like I don't really have a place, so it often feels like what I'm doing is a performance, whether it's meant to be or not.
When Judith Butler was talking about it, she was trying to distinguish it from performance, which would imply that there's an individual actor behind behaviors and stuff people do, whereas performativity is an account of discursive systems that play into creating things that look natural but in fact are not.